Shooby doo boop boop doop boo. Roo doo. Music for an intro theme song. Three body thinking, yeah. Hey everyone, welcome to Three Body Thinking podcast and video cast. I don't know. I don't really play with social media, so I don't know what any of that's really called. But what I can tell you is that theme song was entirely done with merely my mouth. So if you thought there was a lot of talented musicians that went into that, you have been fooled. That is obviously just for the people who are only listening to this, because otherwise you can see my face. As you listen, there might be cars that go by. The house across the street is having their deck redone, so you may hear that occasionally. Hopefully you hear birds in the background in the wind as I sit on my deck underneath our tree with lots of lovely animals around. And you may hear a train as well. As you'll come to find out, the reason why I am not inside in a padded room where there is zero indication that I'm living in the real world, because the sound is so controlled, is a big part of the philosophy of three body thinking, which, since this is the first ever episode, welcome, congratulations on joining the journey at the ground floor. You'll come to find out that the whole point of three body thinking is the acceptance of the lack of control and the innate instability of the universe. So if it gets noisy and I have to pause for a second, I don't really mind doing that. Hopefully you don't mind listening for that. And then also, it may precisely be the reason that people do actually enjoy listening to this podcast over other podcasts, because it doesn't seem polished and professional and well curated, where I think all of the other top 50 podcasts in the world all sound like they're done in a booth, completely controlled for every aspect. But I don't really enjoy doing life that way, because life, again, is inherently out of our control. So, on that note, let's talk about three body thinking, how I came to come up with that, and what it means. If you have seen The Three Body Problem on Netflix and or the original Chinese or Japanese version, I can't remember, then you're probably aware of kind of where I'm going with this. And or if you're just a physics or math nerd or philosophy nerd, you may also already be familiar with what three body problem is. The three body problem is circulating around the idea that celestial bodies that are orbiting each other are inherently unpredictable. Now, you may think of the sun and the earth, and you think, that's pretty predictable. I remember 5th grade science, and I remember that we knew where all the other planets were in our solar system, so much so that we could send satellites there, imagery devices there, and even land potentially one day on, a moon on Saturn, ways away, and we've already landed on Mars. So obviously that's predictable. The difference between that and what I am talking about is in the three body problem, you have three celestial bodies all orbiting each other. So right now we are all orbiting the sun, which is at the center of our solar system. If you didn't know that already, hello flat earthers, glad to have you here. But the earth is indeed orbiting the sun. So what that means is the sun is our center point, and we all are kind of in a continuous fall around it. We are simultaneously falling towards and trying to escape the sun's orbit, and it keeps us in this nice predictable line. That is true of all planets and all, at least in our solar system, and all moons orbiting their planets. Now, what is different in the three body problem is you would essentially have three suns that are all orbiting each other. So there is no center point for them. That is constantly changing. So as one sun goes down, the other, I guess they wouldn't be called suns, but stars, the other star goes up, and while that star goes up, the third star goes sideways, which creates a new center of mass for the gravitational pull, and then they all kind of tug and pull on each other in this chaotic dance. Now, it seems like it would be easy to predict where those three celestial bodies, those three stars, are going to be, but in reality, you have to have every single data point to know where they're going to be in the next moment, their angle of momentum, their mass, where they just how they are pulling on each other. And when you do that, you can predict out with some certainty a short amount of time. But if we get into trying to predict out where they're going to be 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, a million years from now, we can't say they'll be precisely this distance from each other. This star will be at this point in space, this star will be at this point in space, because you would have to go literally layer by layer every single data point. So in this second they're here, and this second they're here, and this second they're here, and you'd have to go all the way out to 1 million years, which takes an enormous amount of data crunching and is currently not feasible for us. How does that and what's known as, again, the three-body problem correlate with what I call three-body thinking? Well, that is the universe, more or less. It is the fact that if we just had the data, if we just had the capability of crunching the numbers, everything about the universe would be inherently predictable. We could say where every single atom is going to be, not just in the next second, not just in the next 100 years, but 1 million years from now, 1 billion years from now, 1 trillion years from now, to the end of the universe, should the universe even have an end. We would have all those answers if we knew how to calculate every single data point for every single interaction, mass, energy, everything in the entire universe. Now, in order for us to be able to do that, it technically takes more energy than is currently available in the universe. So it's almost like an impossible problem that will never be solved, barring some new level of physics that opens up a door that we're unaware of right now. So that is the inherently predictable part of three-body thinking, that the universe is a solvable problem, that we will always have the opportunity to know what comes next if we just have enough information about all of the data points pertaining to the situation. Now, as kind of hinted at, on the other side of that, we have the inherent chaos of that situation, which is the acceptance that we are never going to be able to have all those data points. We're never going to be able to have all of that information. So the universe, therefore, is unpredictable. Now, we don't even have to go to the grand scale of the universe to admit this. Even me sitting on this patio right now, I don't know when the next train is going to come by. I don't know if the person across the street is going to slam their thumb with a hammer and then start yelling, and all of a sudden I'm 40 minutes into this and you just hear bloody murder screams in the background, because I don't have all the data to know how to predict that. But if I did have all the data to know how to predict that, I could tell you that precisely 14 minutes from now, he's going to stub his toe, fall off the deck, land on his back, knock the wind out of himself, and then start screaming as soon as he recatches his breath. Sounds kind of crazy, I know. But that is, by definition, three-body thinking, which is that you will always feel like the world should be more predictable than it is, while also always having to accept that it is wildly unpredictable. Which I'm just going to let you sit in that for a second, because it kind of breaks the brain. And this isn't something that I came up with after watching one TV show. Please know that. Although I do recommend it. I thought it was pretty entertaining. I love sci-fi, so I will chat sci-fi with anybody until we're both out of breath and need to take a nap. It always excites me, especially when they challenge you and they break your brain in different ways to see the world through a new lens. How three-body thinking came to be was ideas that I have kind of processed and put together over a decade plus of reading and listening to physics, mathematics, biology, neurology, sociology, psychology, everyology, just about, that you can think of, and trying to piece together a worldview that makes sense for my brain. Which isn't easy, and it's always in production. So there's 100% chance that 10 years from now, I'm going to look back at this and think I was barely scratching the surface, or I might see it in a completely different way. But the odds of me feeling exactly as I feel right now 10 years from now are slim to none, because I am always trying to understand the world at a greater depth and through a different lens, what I believe to be a more honest lens. Yeah, so with three-body thinking, the most difficult part for most people to wrap their heads around is going to be the acceptance that life is almost 100% out of your control. Again, I'll let you sit in that for a second, because you're probably thinking, well, I wake up and I picked what shirt I put on today, and I chose to get coffee, and I could quit my job at any point in time, and I could move to Denmark if I wanted to. I could learn a new language. I could pick up playing the guitar. I can make new friends. I have so much control over my life. And this is how most people live their life. Most people are going to go through their life believing that if I just do X, Y will follow. Case in point being, as you grow up, you want to get your education. That's pushed, at least in America and for most developed countries, a big push for just the natural stage of life. As you grow up, you get an education, you take it seriously, then you go to college, you get a job in college, or maybe you go to a trade school, or maybe you just pick up a trade outside of school that opens up a career for you. But all of these seem like logical steps. So if you do this, the next thing follows. And for the most part, that works out. I went to school, I went to college, then I got my master's, and then I got a job that was fairly related to what my master's was in. And now I've done that for the past 15-ish years, and everything's kind of followed as one might expect. But the journey along the way was volatile at many moments and very unpredictable, to the point where that's kind of what sparked my idea of three-body thinking. It was one of the kernels, one of the seeds that was originally planted for me to have to accept that how I got here today, how I am in this moment having this conversation with a phone while I'm still learning to not stare at the screen and myself, and instead to pretend to make eye contact with you because you're all miles away and I can't actually make eye contact with you. But it feels like I am now. I'll be better in the future. For those of you that are listening, thank you for bearing with me for that 15-second learning curve, because none of that means anything to you since you're just listening. But with three-body thinking in my career, there are moments in my career that I never would have predicted having happen. There are moments in my life that I never would have predicted having happen to me. And yet those are some of the most important moments that wildly changed where I am today, how I see the world, who I am as a person, and how I interact with the people and everything on a day-to-day basis around me. It would be foolish to assume that those random events are any less important than the quote-unquote planned ones. Oftentimes we assume that if we get our degree, then again, Y will follow, the next variable follows. But what we don't realize is all of the things outside of our control, all of the extraneous circumstances that push on us more than we are aware. So maybe you apply for a job, and because you have your degree, you assume this is great. I have all of the qualifications. This is what I wanted to be doing. So this is what is going to line up in my life. I have put all of the prior conceived work into landing in this exact position. What you don't realize is that while you were doing that, somebody else who was applying for the job was more qualified for you, ended up getting sick, not showing up for the interview. They're on a timeline for work, so they did not want to reschedule that interview, and instead they went with you. Again, inherently chaotic in life. Those are the variables that, again, if we had all the variables we could predict, and then yes, you would know you got that job, because you're gonna know that person's gonna wake up sick, you're gonna know that they ate bad leftovers, and you're gonna know that the company's not gonna want to reschedule, and then you're gonna know that you're qualified for the job, and everything falls into place. But we don't have the luxury of knowing all of that, so we have to live in the dark. We have to live in the inherent chaos of the unknown. Our brains are phenomenal at post hoc piecing together a world and a narrative that makes sense to us. There's a lot of good research that goes into what is human consciousness, and the idea that human consciousness is simply us reflecting back on events that have already happened and then justifying those events with reasoning that makes sense in our brain. For example, if you're unaware of what the split brain experiments are, and it's not like there's just one set of them, there's lots of research that goes into split brain. And what split brain is if people have surgery to, so I'll start back just one more step. If people have seizures, oftentimes they'll cut the middle of their brain because there's something called the corpus callosum that attaches the two sides of the brain. So your right hemisphere and your left hemisphere will chatter back and forth. And there's a dense neural network that is basically a highway for that to go back and forth. So that when something fires on the right side of your brain, your left side of your brain knows what's going on. They will cut that so that when you have seizures on one side of your brain, it doesn't shut the whole system down. It's just gonna affect that side, and it's not gonna go across and affect the other side. Now, they will do experiments where they will essentially tell one side of your body, like just your right ear, that you're gonna go up and get a soda out of the vending machine. And then they will ask the left side of your brain, why did you go get that soda? And the left side of your brain has no idea that the right side of your brain heard, go get a soda, as an instruction. So instead, it makes up whole cloth a reason for going and getting soda. Well, I've been here for 30 minutes. I was starting to get thirsty. I have a little bit of dry mouth, so I just figured a soda sounds great. I have low blood sugar. I haven't eaten lunch yet. Whatever it is, your brain's gonna post hoc make up a reason for wanting to go get that soda. If that at all sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend that you dive into split brain research a little bit more. It's wildly fascinating. But it just goes to show, again, with three body thinking, how much of our life we pretend to have control over, because once we're there, everything that's already in the past, we post hoc make sense of. Well, of course I have this job now because I was fired here, and that opened here, and that led to this. What it negates is that whisper in our right ear, all that information, all the chaos of things, all the data points that went on around us that we didn't have access to and will never have access to. How much of your life, how much of where you are right now is wildly out of your control, even down to the parents you were born to, the year you were born, the socio-demographic that you grew up in, the random thing that a stranger said to you on a subway that caused you to go get a coffee instead of a soda, and then you bumped into somebody else, or it made you late for something else. All of these random little events have made you exactly who you are today, but we operate under the belief of just choosing to accept the moments that we felt we made decisions as the most important moments of our life, and or post hoc go back and look at these moments and say, oh, it makes sense now that I am here, because now I can go back and rationalize it after it's having already been done. If that sounds crazy to you and it sounds obscure, like maybe you don't even understand it yet, or challenging, maybe there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance. If I sound like a loony that belongs in a loony bin because, I don't know, maybe you rely on faith a lot and God or Jesus or whoever has laid out a path for you that you're following, and everything has a reason and a purpose. That is how the majority of people feel. Because I'll be honest, it's not always easy, even I struggle with it, to accept that I have almost no control in how I arrived at this moment. I'm going to do podcasts in the future that talk about free will and talk about my ideas on free will. And by my ideas, I just mean really scratching the surface of other way smarter people than I, their ideas, and trying to piece it together in my mind for what makes sense to me. There's a book called Determined that I highly recommend if you're really interested in free will, by Sapolsky is the last name. And there's other books that I probably will go through and recommend along the way. But yeah, this is what life is all about to me, is leaning in to the chaos and leaning in to the inherent unpredictability of life. Because the more you lean into that, the more you realize just how much freedom there is in the world around you. How much freedom there is to be somebody that you really wish you could be, while simultaneously, and here's the hard part, accepting that a lot of that push towards becoming what you want to become is largely out of your hands. Yeah, I know. Trying to square that circle is tough. I don't blame you if you're struggling with that right now. It's taking me years and years of, again, reading and exploring just to arrive at this point. And by no means am I going to say that I will still be here 10 years from now. I hope the depth of my knowledge continues to grow as I learn and share more with you all. But if you continue to tune in, prepare to be challenged in some way in every single episode to see the world in a different light. Because to me, that is the whole purpose of life in general, is to explore and to learn and to grow and to find out more than you knew the day before, look at the world through a different light. And that's not just in science and knowledge and philosophy, that's in relationships. So much we take for granted in our lives that, our friends are always going to be our friends and they're always going to be who they are and we're always going to be who we are with them. But anybody who's been in a long-term relationship, whether it's a spouse, especially children as their brain develops, or your parents as you've grown older with them, realize just how much people can change and do change over the years. And again, that's all the inherent nature of three-body thinking, that nothing is a steady state. Nothing will ever be the same as it was in this very moment. This next second is different. This next second is different. It is always going to change. And as it changes, there is an inherent unpredictability in that, while simultaneously knowing that the universe is wildly predictable. We're just unable to access it. I hope that intrigues at least some of you enough to continue to tune in to episodes. The next episode that I'm going to do is going to be about zipper merges, which I hope is a hot enough topic for people that they're interested in probably driving while listening to it and ranting about which part of the zipper merge they're on. Because we're going to talk about the person that immediately gets over as soon as they know they need to, the person who I am, which will drive to the very end and then zipper merge over. And we'll talk about who's right in that scenario. And then also who I call the vigilante hero, who's going to drive down the middle of the road, protecting law and order for all of the weak citizens who got in line earlier. And then they get to go home a hero at night and tell their spouse just how brave they were to slow down traffic and potentially get in a 5-car pileup as people run into the back of them. Anyways, I think you can tell that I'm a little bit, I've got some emotion behind that and what I'm going to say, because I know I'm right and I know the science says that I'm right, and the data. So I'm really excited to talk about that. And really, as I talk about that, the actual message that I'm trying to pass along is just how right we can all feel about the way we see the world, while simultaneously being just so wrong, which again goes back to what three-body thinking is all about. That the world is indeed inherently predictable, but we are wildly bad at predicting it because we just don't have enough processing power to be able to do so. So we just kind of gap fill and make sense of the world in our own way. And oftentimes the way we make sense of the world is just so often wrong because it fits a narrative that we want to so badly be true. Yeah. So thank you for making it the full 25-ish minutes if you did. I hope you tune in for more. And if you hated it, leave a comment letting me know that you hated it, because I'll never look, because I don't really care. Enjoy. Doo-doo boop. Merp, burp, ba-doo. Outro music. Three-body thinking. Ba-dum.